Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to another exciting grade 2 math lesson where learning math is fun. I am Faithlyn Williams, your teacher for today. In today's session, we will identify, describe, and complete patterns. In the process, we will look at repeating patterns, decreasing patterns, and increasing patterns. We are going to have fun today, boys and girls. Now, patterns are all around us. We see patterns out there in nature. We see patterns in how shapes are arranged, as seen with the shapes in the beehive and even the stripes on the bees. We see patterns on plants, birds, as seen with the spots on this peacock's feathers. We also see patterns on tiles and on animals as seen with the stripes on the tigers shown here and even the spots on a leopard. Every pattern follows a simple rule. The rule is how the pattern works. And boys and girls, we will identify the rules in patterns as we go along. Now, when objects, events, or numbers are repeated uniformly in a specific way, a pattern is formed. We will introduce the lesson by engaging in a discussion about the 3 types of patterns that we will explore in today's lesson. Now look at this pattern, boys and girls. What do you notice? Wow. If you said you notice that this pattern begins with a blue rectangle and is followed by a red star, then another blue rectangle, followed by another red star, and we have another blue rectangle, followed by another red star. That is awesome, boys and girls. The pattern is doing the same thing over and over again in a certain way. This is called a repeating pattern. And there we have it, repeating pattern. So we had our rectangle, then a star, a rectangle, then a star, rectangle, then a star. My goodness. Boys and girls, did you know that we can use letters to help us identify the rule of a pattern? Or maybe we could use numbers. Let us look at how we can use letters to label these patterns so that we can identify what will come next. So we will use A for the rectangles and B for the stars. And there we have it. A, B, A, B, A, B. Now we will use numbers to label the patterns. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So all our rectangles are numbered 1 and all the stars are numbered 2. Boys and girls, look at this next pattern. Can you tell me what is missing from it? Amazing, boys and girls, but tell us how you got your answer. If you said first, you think of the rule of this pattern, that is correct. The rule is how the pattern works. Let's see if we can identify the rule of this pattern. Here we see one cat, then 2 birds, then another cat, and 1 bird, and a mystery spot where that red line is. Then another cat and 2 birds. Just by looking at the pattern, what do you think goes in the mystery spot with the red line, boys and girls? Awesome. A bird. A bird goes here. Amazing. Let's look at that. So there we have it. How do we know that a bird goes there? Well, we have to look at the clues in the pattern. Notice that wherever we see 1 cat, it is followed by 2 birds. Continuing this pattern, we see that the rule is 1 cat followed by 2 birds. 1 cat and 2 birds. Boys and girls, we are just having fun with patterns. Now look at this other pattern. What do you think is happening in the pattern? Amazing. If you said each term is 1 more than the previous, you are correct. Or maybe you said the pattern is getting larger and larger. That too is correct. When a pattern gets larger, we say the pattern is increasing or growing. That's the second kind of pattern that we will look at. Increasing or growing pattern. Now, to help us know if a pattern is increasing, we look at what is happening as we move from one pattern to the next. Let's observe the pattern seen here. What do you notice as we move from one X to the next? Wow. If you said you notice that as we move from one X to the next, one X is added, that is correct. Remember now, a pattern has a rule. And what is the rule for this pattern? Great going, boys and girls. If you said it starts with 1x and increases or get bigger by 1x, you rock, boys and girls. Let us look at this pattern. How it's growing. There we go. 1, 2. And the next is 1, 2, 3. And there. The next is 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, boys and girls, can you guess how many X's would come in the next pattern if we should continue? Excellent. If you said 5 X's, that's correct. Now, to know how many X's should come in the next pattern, you can start by copying the last pattern and then add 1 more X to it to make it 1 bigger than the previous pattern. Let's do that now, boys and girls. So there we have it. We copy 1, 2, 3, 4 and add 1 X to it. So there we have it. The final pattern in this pattern has 5 X's. Boys and girls, I think you are going to be great pattern detectives today. Oh. Now, let's look at another pattern. Tell me, what do you notice as we move from one pattern to the next? Awesome, boys and girls. If you said you notice that as we move from one pattern to the next, 2 roses are added, that is brilliant, boys and girls. Remember, a pattern has a rule. Can you tell me what is the pattern and what is the rule for this pattern? Great, we see roses here. Wow, amazing. If you said the roses start out with 3 and increases by 2, you rock, boys and girls. Can you guess how many roses would come next if we should continue the pattern? First, before you tell me that, let us look at this pattern growing. So there we have it. 3, we start out with 3 roses, and then we keep adding 2 each time. So 3 roses plus 2 gives us 5 roses. And then 2 roses added to 5 roses gives us 7 roses. Are you ready to tell me how many roses would be in the next pattern if we should continue? Way to go, boys and girls. If you said we need 9 roses to continue the pattern, that's awesome. To get the next pattern, you start by copying the last pattern and then add 2 more roses to it to make it 2 more than the previous pattern. Let's see how that happens. So here we go, we will copy 7 roses as we see in the previous pattern, and then we will add 2 more roses to the 7 roses and we get 9 roses. Boys and girls, you are great pattern detectives and you're just getting better and better. Now, here is another pattern for you. What do you think is happening in this pattern? But first, let us look at the number of squares we have in each of our pattern. And so for the first pattern, how many squares do you see? Right, there are 10 yellow squares. And in the second pattern, how many squares do you see? Yes, boys and girls, there are 8 yellow squares. What about the third pattern? How many squares do you see? Excellent. There are 6 squares. And now for our last pattern. How many squares do you see? There we have it. We have 4 squares in the last pattern. What do you notice is happening as we move from one number to the next? Boys and girls, if you said each number is counting down by 2, that is brilliant. When the number of things in a pattern goes down each time, we say the pattern is decreasing. Yes, and that's the third type of pattern. Look at it decreasing, it's just shrinking. So another name for decreasing pattern is shrinking pattern. When something decreases, it shrinks, or we say it gets smaller. Now, boys and girls, remember, a pattern has a rule. Do you know the rule of this pattern? Awesome. If you said it starts at 10 and decreases by 2, that's awesome, boys and girls. Indeed, you are becoming super pattern detectives. And there we have it, starting with 10 and taking away 2 each time. Now, boys and girls, we know that practice makes perfect. And so, since we have learned how to identify and describe patterns, it is time to practice. Here is your first task. Identify the missing pattern. Are you ready to share, boys and girls? In this pattern, you've got to look carefully to tell what is missing. Is the missing pattern an apple or a banana? Let's check to find the rule of the pattern, then use this to help us identify the missing pattern. First, in the pattern, we have 2 bananas. Next, we have 1 apple. And next, 2 bananas, followed by 1 apple, and then 2 bananas, followed by 1 apple. Boys and girls, if you said the missing pattern is a banana, you are correct. Now, what is the rule of this pattern again, boys and girls? Let's see. It's easy to, let's remind ourselves, it is easy to identify what is the missing pattern if we number them. Let's look at this. So yes, we see that this is a repeating pattern because we have 2 bananas, 1 apple, 2 bananas, 1 apple, 2 bananas, and 1 apple. Boys and girls, you are doing excellently at patterns. And as we said, this is a repeating pattern because it's doing the same thing over and over. And now for your second task. Identify the missing pattern that should go on this mystery line. First, I want you to look at the pattern and tell me what you notice, boys and girls. Wow. If you said you noticed that you have 1 white egg followed by 1 brown egg, and this is happening over and over, you are correct. So can you tell me what is missing from the pattern? Is it a white egg? Or is it a brown egg? Awesome, boys and girls. If you said the missing pattern is a white egg, wow, look at that. You have just earned yourself a special badge as a pattern detective. And there you go. You have your badges. There we go, boys and girls. Let's move on to the next task. Here is your third task. Here you are given the first, second, and third patterns. Can you complete the pattern to show which pattern would come next, boys and girls? I'll give you some time to think about it. Wow, I hear you talking and going on, but look at it. How can you tell which pattern would be next? Wow, if you said we could find the rule of the pattern, this could help us to tell which pattern comes next. That is brilliant. Have you noticed a rule for this star pattern, boys and girls? Great going. If you said you noticed that the bottom row for the star pattern is increasing or growing by the next counting number, that is correct. You might have even seen a different pattern, but let's look at what is happening as we move from one pattern to the next. Here we have one star. In the next pattern, we see 2 rows of stars, and 2 stars are added to the second row. In the third pattern, another row of stars is added, and there are 3 stars in this row. Now, boys and girls, now that you have identified the rule and you see that this is a growing pattern, now tell me, if we should continue this pattern, what will the fourth pattern look like? Excellent, boys and girls. I hear you shouting out the answer. But to get the fourth pattern, we must first draw the third pattern, then add 1 row with 4 stars. Amazing, boys and girls. Let's look at that being done on the screen. So there we have it. We're going to draw the third pattern, add another row with 4 stars. So there we have it, boys and girls. If you got the same pattern as shown here, you did excellently as pattern detectives. And here is your next task. I want you to draw the pattern that comes next. Look at my pattern detectives going. Get ready to share your answer. Okay, boys and girls, I know you are raring and ready to give your answer. But first, tell me what you notice about the caterpillars as you move from one caterpillar to the next. Did you say you noticed that the green ovals on the body of the caterpillars are decreasing or getting less? That is awesome, boys and girls. Can you identify a rule for how the ovals are decreasing? Or maybe you call them circles, but that's all right, boys and girls. Let's check to see how the ovals on each caterpillar is decreasing. First, let's count the ovals on the first caterpillar. Count with me, boys and girls. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there are 8 ovals on the first caterpillar. Now, let's check the ovals on the second caterpillar. Count with me, boys and girls. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 ovals on the second caterpillar. And now I want for you to count and tell me how many ovals are on the third caterpillar. Way to go, boys and girls. 1, 2, 3, 4 ovals are on the third caterpillar. Now, continuing this pattern, can you tell me how many ovals will be on the last caterpillar? Awesome, boys and girls. If you said we are subtracting 2 ovals from the previous pattern to get the next pattern, that is brilliant. And so using this rule, we will have 2 ovals on the last caterpillar. Boys and girls, this is awesome. And my pattern detectives are just doing excellently. So there we have it. If your caterpillar look like this, you are doing excellently, boys and girls. There we have it. 2 ovals on the last caterpillar. And now for your next task. Boys and girls, listen to that sound. What do you hear? I hope I'm not scaring you. Now, something is missing from this pattern. I wonder if you can tell me what is missing. Wow, boys and girls. Did you say some owls are missing from the pattern? That's awesome. But how many owls should we have on the line? Yes, we have a mystery line there. How many owls should be there? Let's look closely at the pattern first before I take your answer. How did the pattern start out, boys and girls? Great. Here we see 1 owl. And what is the next pattern? Yes, 1 eagle. But guess what? We will number the eagle 2. So all our eagles will have the number 2. And we will number our owls based on what we see there. So let's put in the numbers to help us identify the patterns shown and to complete the missing pattern. Next in the pattern, we see, count with me, 1, 2 owls. And that is followed by 1 eagle, which we will number 2. Now, based on the pattern so far, boys and girls, we know that, let me ask you, what should come next? Awesome. We know that owls should come next, but how many? We will come back to the missing part of the pattern. Let's continue with what is given in the pattern here, and then use it to help us identify how many owls should be next. So yes, we have the mystery spot, and then we have our eagle, which we number 2. And that is followed by, let's count how many owls we see. 1, 2, 3, 4 owls. And then our eagle, which we will number 2. Boys and girls, you are doing so well. And I think you are ready now to tell me how many owls should go in that mystery spot. Excellent, boys and girls. You are great pattern detectives. We notice that the number of eagles remain the same, and we notice that the owls are increasing or growing by 1 each time. So we saw that we have 1 owl followed by 1 eagle, then 2 owls followed by 1 eagle. And the third spot, we should now have 1, 2, 3 owls. There you have it, boys and girls. And now we will move to the next task. You're doing so well at patterns, boys and girls. And I know you already have the answer for the missing pattern here. You're asked to complete the missing pattern. Are you ready to tell me what is the missing pattern, boys and girls? Wow, boys and girls. If you said the missing ice cream cone should have 4 scoops of ice cream with a different color, you are correct. But tell me how you know. Awesome, boys and girls. If you also said you notice that if we start with the last ice cream cone, we could figure out the pattern. That is awesome. So starting with the last ice cream cone in the pattern, we see that there is 1 scoop of ice cream. And when we move to the previous ice cream cone, that's the one before, we see that it has 2 scoops of ice cream. Okay, and there, when we move to the one in front of that, it has 3 scoops of ice cream. Yes, this pattern helps us to know that the first ice cream cone should have 4 scoops of ice cream. But remember, the 4th scoop should be of a different color as the pattern shows. Boys and girls, you are doing excellently at patterns. And what great detectives you are. Here is your next task. Look at the pattern and tell me which word describes the pattern. I wonder how my pattern detectives will do at this one. Are you ready, boys and girls? So tell me which of the words in the bracket describe this pattern. Great going, boys and girls. If you said the pattern is decreasing, you are great pattern detectives. The red circles for each pattern is 2 less than the previous pattern. And so there we have it. This pattern is a decreasing pattern. There we have it. So we saw that the first pattern had 6 red circles. And when we take away 2 from 6, we got 4. So the second pattern is showing 4 red circles. And when we take away 2 from 4, we get 2. And the last pattern has 2 red circles. There we have it. Our decreasing pattern. And here is your next task. Which word describes this pattern, boys and girls? Wow, that's excellent. This pattern is a repeating pattern. Wow, boys and girls. A repeating pattern does the same thing over and over again. So here we have it. 2 red and blue macaws, 1 green parrot, 2 red and blue macaws, 1 green parrot, 2 red and blue macaws, and 1 green parrot. That's our repeating pattern, boys and girls. And here is another pattern for you. In this pattern, I want you to complete and describe the pattern. Are you ready to tell me what you did to complete your pattern, boys and girls? I wonder if you noticed that you were asked to do two things. Complete the pattern and then describe it. Now go right ahead and tell me what you got for your answer. Great job, boys and girls. If you said the missing pattern should have 2 more branches than the previous one, you are correct. Amazing. And if you said the pattern is increasing, that is excellent. So let's put in the 4th pattern. There we have it. It grew by 2 more branches, and this is an increasing pattern. My pattern detectives, we are just having fun, and you are doing excellently at patterns. Now, boys and girls, here is your final activity for today's lesson. Look at these numbers. Can you tell what is the pattern rule? Let me give you some time to think about it, boys and girls. Are you ready to share? And I know my pattern detectives got this one. What did you say your answer is? Great job, boys and girls. The rule of this pattern is starting with 1 and adding 2 each time. And there we have it. 2 added to 1 gives us 3, and 2 added to 3 gives us 5. 2 added to 5 gives us 7, and 2 added to 7 gives us 9. Wow, what an excellent job you did today, boys and girls. And now it's time for us to recap. It was fun identifying, describing, and completing patterns. Let's look at a few reminders. When objects, events, or numbers are repeated uniformly in a specific way, a pattern is formed. And every pattern follows a rule. Repeating pattern is one of the patterns we looked at. This pattern is a repeating pattern. It does the same thing over and over. Here we see 1 yellow rectangle going across, 2 red rectangles going up, then 1 rectangle going across, and 2 red rectangles going up, and then 1 yellow rectangle going across. And that's our repeating pattern. The next type of pattern we looked at was increasing pattern. For increasing patterns, each pattern is bigger than the previous pattern, as shown here with these woodpeckers. Oh, they are so lovely. And then we looked at decreasing patterns. For decreasing patterns, each pattern is smaller than the previous pattern. So here we have it, 10 mangoes on the first tree, followed by 7 mangoes on the second tree, and 4 mangoes on the third tree. Boys and girls, that's all for today. Remember now, practice makes perfect. Keep on practicing until next time.